The lights of the United Nations chamber burned brighter than ever, every lens and microphone locked in, every heartbeat of the audience synchronized with anticipation. This wasn't a summit about resolutions or abstract diplomacy, it was about exposure, confrontation, and truth. The tension cut through the air like steel. On one side of the polished table sat Donald Trump, stiff in posture, jaw set, his iconic scowl sharpened by the glare of the cameras. On the other side sat Denzel Washington, calm, unshaken, his presence heavier than the silence itself. When the moderator opened the floor, the world expected the usual: policy soundbites, vague promises, and political theatrics. Instead, they got fire. Denzel leaned forward, his voice low but deliberate, every syllable landing with the weight of judgment. "Mr. Trump, the world has seen enough ambiguity. You have stood shoulder to shoulder with Benjamin Netanyahu while Gaza burns. The evidence is clear, you're not just complicit, you're in collaboration." The words detonated. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Heads turned sharply, some toward Trump, others toward the cameras, knowing millions were already watching live. Journalists nearly fell over each other, typing furiously, as if the story had already written itself. Trump, unfazed at first, let out a scoff, then leaned back in his chair with that trademark smirk. His reply was ice-coated venom: "Denzel, you're a good actor. But let me remind you, this isn't Hollywood, this is the real world, and in the real world, I make deals. You spin fairy tales." Laughter broke out among a few of Trump's allies seated behind him, but it didn't echo long. Because while Trump smirked, the camera cut to Denzel's expression: calm, steady, piercing. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just stared, as though looking through Trump and into the script of history itself. That was the hook. The question wasn't whether Trump had dismissed Denzel. The question was whether the world would accept that dismissal, or finally see it for what it was: arrogance masking an alliance that too many had tried to ignore. The silence after Trump's retort wasn't the silence of agreement, it was the silence of disbelief. Delegates shifted in their seats, the weight of the moment pressing down on the chamber like a storm cloud ready to break. Cameras zoomed in, catching every twitch, every flicker of expression. This wasn't a debate anymore, it was a live autopsy of credibility. Denzel leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor unshaken. His voice dropped even lower, but its gravity pulled the room toward him. "Deals, Mr. Trump? Is that what you call it when hospitals collapse under rubble, when aid convoys are turned away, when children starve in refugee camps? You call that a deal? The world calls it complicity." Gasps again. Delegates from Europe and Africa nodded subtly, their pen scribbling notes that would become tomorrow's headlines. The interpreter booths buzzed as translators rushed to keep pace with the escalating exchange. Trump shot forward in his seat, his face flushed, hands gripping the edge of the table. "You don't understand foreign policy, Denzel. You read scripts. I wrote history. Netanyahu is a strong leader, and I work with strong leaders. That's how peace is made." The words rang hollow. His attempt at dominance slipped into desperation, his voice cracking under the glare. The cameras, merciless, captured the sweat forming at his temple, the quiver at the edge of his jaw. Denzel didn't raise his tone, he didn't need to. His calm precision sliced sharper than any outburst could. Strong leaders don't hide behind the suffering of innocents. They don't exploit chaos for personal gain. You say this isn't Hollywood? Then why does your defense sound like a performance rehearsed 1,000 times? The chamber stirred. Reporters glanced at each other, already imagining tomorrow's front page. Denzel flips the script on Trump at UN. Trump tried to laugh, a hollow chuckle that only highlighted his discomfort. "You think you've got me figured out? You think you're smarter than the rest of the world? Nobody knows deals like I do. Nobody." His voice trembled as the echoes faded, replaced by the clicking of cameras and the scribble of pens. In that moment, Denzel didn't speak further. He let Trump's words hang, let the weight of them collapse under their own emptiness. Silence became his weapon, and it pierced sharper than accusation. The world wasn't just watching a debate anymore. They were watching a mask slip, live, in front of millions, the cameras didn't blink, and neither did Denzel. For a few stretched seconds, it seemed like the entire chamber was frozen in place, delegates holding their breath, journalists barely daring to type, translators pausing mid-sentence. Then Denzel broke the stillness with a voice steady as a judge delivering a verdict. "You call it strength, Mr. Trump. But the world sees dependency. You stand beside Netanyahu, not because it builds peace, but because it builds your image. Tell us, when Gaza bleeds, is that your definition of leadership?" The chamber erupted. Gasps, murmurs, whispers in half a dozen languages filled the air like sparks from dry tinder. Delegates craned their necks to see Trump's reaction, sensing that history was being written in real time. Trump slammed a hand on the table, the microphone catching the thud like a drumbeat. "Enough. I won't sit here and be lectured by an actor who doesn't know the first thing about foreign policy. You don't understand power. You don't understand deals. You only understand drama." His voice, meant to intimidate, instead betrayed a crack. Sweat glistened under the harsh lights. The control he so carefully projected was slipping, piece by piece, visible for the world to dissect. And then, Denzel delivered the blow. Calm, unflinching, unshaken, drama? No, Mr. Trump. Drama is when leaders pretend to seek peace while signing away lives behind closed doors. Drama is when photo ops matter more than the lives buried under rubble. This, he gestured toward the delegates, the cameras, the watching world, this is truth. And truth doesn't need a script. The line detonated like dynamite. Reporters hammered their keyboards, hashtags exploding online, hashtag truth without script and hashtag Trump exposed at UN trended within minutes. On live feeds, the split screen told the story better than words could. Trump, red-faced and trembling with fury, Denzel poised and collected, his words echoing in the silence Trump couldn't fill. For the first time, some of Trump's own allies in the room shifted uncomfortably. A delegate from Eastern Europe muttered under his breath, "He's unraveling." The comment, though quiet, was picked up by a nearby mic and replayed endlessly online. The power balance had shifted. The actor was no longer performing, the president was. And the world could see the difference. The chaos in the chamber refused to settle. Trump leaned back, waving his hand dismissively, but the smirk he tried to wear looked strained, almost cracked. He grabbed his notes, flipping the pages too quickly, searching for a line to regain control. But the crowd wasn't waiting. Whispers rolled through the hall like thunder. "Is he dodging? Did you hear that?" He didn't answer. Then Denzel pressed forward, his voice lower now, but sharper, each word slicing through the noise. "Mr. Trump, you speak of deals. But the world sees bodies, not balance sheets. How many backroom agreements does it take before the truth can't be hidden? Netanyahu stands beside you when cameras flash, but when bombs fall, he vanishes. And you vanish with him." The chamber's translators scrambled to keep up. Delegates from the Middle East leaned forward, nodding grimly. Journalists' fingers blurred across keyboards. The words weren't just a challenge, they were an indictment, delivered on live television to an audience of millions. Trump finally snapped. "Lies. All lies," he barked, his voice cracking into the microphone. "I brought peace, historic peace. No one in this room has done more for Israel, more for America, more for the world, than me." His face flushed crimson, veins visible at his temple, his fist pounding the table. But instead of applause, silence followed. Silence heavy enough to suffocate. And then came the dagger. Denzel didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. He simply said, "If you brought peace, Mr. Trump, then why does Gaza still burn?" The sentence landed like a hammer blow. Cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker in Trump's expression, the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the narrowing of his eyes, the sudden dart of his gaze toward the floor. The room held its breath. One delegate from Africa whispered, "That's it. He's cornered." Another, from South America, leaned toward a colleague, "The mask is gone." Outside the chamber, social media caught fire. Clips of the exchange went viral instantly, racking up millions of views in less than an hour. Memes flooded Twitter, Trump slamming the desk versus Denzel calmly standing tall, tagged with captions like, strength versus spectacle, and, truth versus tantrum. Inside, Trump tried to recover, pointing a finger at Denzel. You don't belong here. You're not a politician, you're a Hollywood actor chasing headlines. But even that line backfired. Denzel, unflinching, looked directly at him. You're right, Mr. Trump. I'm not here for politics. I'm here for humanity. Something this room seems to have forgotten. The audience erupted, not in applause, but in a raw, collective murmur of recognition. Trump's attempt to dismiss him had only cemented the moment. The chamber had shifted. The power no longer sat at the head of the table, it pulsed in the space between Denzel's calm gaze and Trump's boiling rage. Reporters smelled blood. Cameras zoomed tighter, catching every tremor in Trump's jaw, every flicker of defiance in his eyes. Denzel didn't push forward with shouting or theatrics. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his voice even quieter, forcing the microphones to catch every syllable. You call this Hollywood, Mr. Trump. But tell me, what script did the mothers in Gaza follow when their homes collapsed? What performance do the fathers give when they bury their children in silence? If this is a stage, then the tragedy you enable is not fiction, it's reality. The words sank into the room like iron weights. Delegates exchanged glances, uncomfortable but transfixed. A representative from Europe raised her phone, recording despite the strict rules. The weight of the moment demanded evidence. Trump slammed his palms against the table, leaning forward with a snarl. You don't get it. You've never had to make these decisions. You've never sat in the Oval Office. You've never carried the burden of protecting millions of Americans while the world tears itself apart. His voice cracked, desperation leaking through the fury. But Denzel, unshaken, replied with surgical precision, You're right. I'm not a president, but I am a citizen, and I am a human being. And that gives me the right to ask, who protects the millions outside America? Who carries their burden when you shake hands with Netanyahu and call it peace? The silence that followed wasn't passive. It was alive, pressing, suffocating, undeniable. Even Trump's staunch allies shifted uncomfortably. His bravado suddenly looked brittle under the spotlight of truth. And then, from the press section, a voice cut through, Answer the question, Mr. Trump. It wasn't planned, but it spread like wildfire. Another voice echoed it. And another. Until half the chamber was whispering, chanting, pressing him with the one question he couldn't dodge, why does Gaza still burn? Trump's lips moved, searching for words, but nothing came out. He shuffled his papers, his hand trembling just slightly. Cameras zoomed tighter, capturing the falter, the break in the armor. Outside, the clip spread across TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Hashtags exploded, hashtag Why Gaza Still Burns and hashtag Hollywood vs. History. Millions watched on their phones as Trump's silence told a story louder than any speech. Denzel didn't gloat. He simply folded his hands on the table, steady as stone. His eyes never left Trump's. That calm, unbreakable presence became the image of the night, a man unarmed but unstoppable, confronting power with nothing but truth. The room tightened like a wire ready to snap. Delegates shifted in their seats, whispers rippling across the chamber in half a dozen languages. Denzel hadn't raised his voice, he didn't need to. His words landed like stone dropped in still water, expanding in every direction. This alliance, he said slowly, tapping a dossier on the table, is not about stability, not about peace. It is about leverage. And when leaders trade leverage, the people under their boots are the ones who bleed. Cameras caught the flicker in Trump's eyes, a flash of annoyance quickly reshaped into a smile too sharp to be genuine. He leaned into the microphone, his voice low but dripping with disdain, Save the monologue, Denzel. This isn't Hollywood. This is the United Nations. And I deal with reality, not scripts. A ripple of shock ran through the chamber, not from the insult itself, but from the contempt in his tone. Trump wasn't just dismissing an argument, he was mocking the man who dared confront him. But Denzel didn't flinch. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back slightly, and let the silence stretch. He knew the weight of a pause could do more damage than 100 words. Reporters scribbled furiously, already crafting headlines. Trump had tried to trivialize the moment, but instead, he had framed himself as the showman. And Denzel, calm and unshaken, had become the mirror in which that performance looked like desperation. The tension in the hall grew heavier, as though the marble columns themselves were leaning in to listen. Trump straightened his tie, his signature scowl etched deep across his face, and turned to the delegates as if to recruit their approval. "Look around," he said, gesturing broadly. "Do you see anyone buying into this nonsense? Israel is a partner, a strong partner, and if Denzel wants to cry conspiracy, let him do it in a movie theater." His words were sharp, but they landed flat. Because Denzel didn't move. He didn't rush to respond, didn't allow the bait to pull him into theatrics. Instead, he opened the dossier slowly, deliberately, as if revealing a secret the world had chosen to ignore. "Page 42, he said, his tone steady, an internal memo, Trump administration strategists discussing how to manage narratives in Gaza by aligning directly with Netanyahu's media team. Not foreign policy. Not diplomacy. Propaganda." Gasps flickered through the chamber, the kind that no press release could spin away. Trump slammed a hand on the table, his voice rising. "Fake. All fake. You think you can come here, embarrass me in front of the world with your staged lines? This is politics, not rehearsal." His anger cracked through the microphones, echoing in every corner. But the louder he grew, the quieter Denzel seemed, his calm presence magnified against Trump's fury. It wasn't just a clash of arguments anymore, it was a test of composure, of who owned the silence that followed. The silence that followed Trump's outburst was deafening. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether they had just witnessed a debate or a breakdown. Cameras zoomed in on Denzel, whose expression remained unchanged, calm, unflinching, almost surgical in its restraint. He tapped the dossier again, this time sliding a single page forward so that its highlighted lines were visible under the chamber's lights. "Words can be denied," he said softly, "but signatures cannot." On the page, in black ink, were initials linking Trump's team to a strategy of coordinated messaging with Netanyahu's advisors during Gaza negotiations. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs erupted in Arabic, French, and Spanish, each voice layering tension across the hall. Trump leaned forward, his face flushed, the microphone catching the tremor in his voice. "Do you think anyone here believes this? Do you think these so-called documents mean anything? It's a witch hunt, just like before. Lies. Pure lies." But his tone betrayed him. He was shouting not to persuade, but to drown out the evidence in front of him. Denzel didn't match the volume. Instead, he looked directly at the delegates, bypassing Trump entirely. "This is not about him or me. This is about trust. If leaders can manipulate truth for their own gain, then the very idea of peace becomes theater. And theater cannot feed the hungry or rebuild Gaza's broken streets." The chamber froze. For the first time, Trump wasn't just arguing against Denzel, he was arguing against the weight of the room itself. Trump's fists clenched on the polished wood table, knuckles widening under the pressure. He leaned into the mic, his voice cracking with forced authority. "You don't get it, Denzel. I built relationships. I kept America safe. I made peace deals when nobody else could. And now you come here, in front of the world, waving papers like some kind of prophet? It's pathetic." His words were sharp, but they lacked the confidence that once carried his rallies. Instead, they sounded cornered, defensive. The cameras caught it all, the sweat at his temple, the twitch in his jaw. Denzel tilted his head slightly, not in triumph, but in recognition of the moment. "You claim peace," he said, his voice even, deliberate, "but what you built was illusion. When mothers in Gaza bury their children, they don't remember press conferences. They remember the silence of those who could have acted and chose not to. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Some delegates nodded quietly, others scribbled notes as though history itself was being recorded. Trump tried to interject, but the room wasn't with him anymore. His words collided with the weight of Denzel's calm delivery and shattered before they landed. One delegate from South America stood, breaking protocol. "This chamber deserves honesty, not spectacle," he said firmly, echoing Denzel's point. Suddenly, it wasn't just one man against Trump. It was the collective eyes of the world, trained on a leader who had always thrived on dominance, now exposed under the light of accountability. The chamber felt less like a diplomatic hall and more like a courtroom, every eye a silent juror. Trump's chest rose and fell quickly, his anger barely contained, his voice faltering between rage and desperation. "I don't answer to lectures," he barked, "not from Hollywood actors, not from self-righteous nobodies. I answer to America." But the declaration fell flat, because the room wasn't America, it was the world, and they weren't applauding. Denzel leaned forward, his calm finally breaking into steel. "Then answer this, Mr. Trump," he said, his voice slicing through the silence. "If your partnership with Netanyahu was about peace, why did it come with media scripts instead of ceasefire agreements? Why were there headlines instead of healing?" The question detonated in the chamber. Trump opened his mouth, but no words came. Cameras zoomed in on his face, the frustration, the trembling lips, the absence of a ready retort. For a man built on quick comebacks and cutting insults, the stillness was unbearable. The silence was louder than any insult Denzel could have crafted. Delegates shifted, some even clapped softly, breaking the rigid etiquette of the UN. Trump slammed his notes shut, muttering, "Ridiculous," but his voice carried no power anymore. Denzel didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply gathered his papers, stood, and said one final line that cut deeper than all the rest: "The truth doesn't need applause. It only needs witnesses." And in that moment, every person in the chamber knew, they had just witnessed history.